Hey everyone, my name is Friendzoned and welcome to the fourth episode of Friendzone Produces. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but there's a hovering head in the middle of your screen. I decided to invest a bit of time in my 3D animation skills to hopefully make those videos a bit more entertaining and personal. So get used to seeing this face. If you're unfamiliar with the concept behind this series, basically anyone can fill up the form that you can find in the description to give me musical guidelines. In this form you can specify genres, moods, and other nerdy things that you would like me to consider when creating my next tracks. So go down there if you want and fill up a form. Today's guidelines are the following. Someone requested a lo-fi hip-hop beat that could be used as a vlog music. Now, dear person who requested this, today's your lucky day because I did not create one track but two only for you. Vlog music never gets too complicated, I feel, so I decided to offer you two tracks with different moods, so you'll have a bit more choice when you have to put some music in your videos. By the way, all my tracks are downloadable for free on SoundCloud, but make sure to link to my YouTube channel and my SoundCloud page when you use them. Now, as I said, the two tracks have very different moods, so I'll tackle each of them separately and break down what I think is the most interesting. Let's get going! So this is the project file for the first track called Grey. Usually when I produce lo-fi hip-hop, I start with the sample and not with the drums. As I see it, you can only sequence the drums when you know the feel, the rhythm, and the groove of the sample. So I'm going to start with there too. This is the main sample. It comes from the track Inside My Love by Jimmy Stewart, and you can listen to it in the description. It's really good. So the sample itself sounds like this. Now what's most interesting in the processing of this sample happens in this rack right here. If I play the sample without the processing, it sounds like this. You can hear it's a bit dry. Now this audio effect rack here essentially acts as a reverb to make it wetter, but it's a bit special because I wanted to compress the reverb signal way more than the dry signal. So to achieve this, I put an audio effect rack here and created two chains. If you're not familiar with this, basically the audio signal will pass through those two chains equally, and then you can process them differently. So I renamed this one dry, and as you can see, there's no audio effect in it. But the wet signal has a reverb set to 100% with a strong compression after it. So the dry signal sounds like this by itself. This is the wet signal only. And here's the two together. So you can hear a bit of difference, I feel, and with the volume here, you can also balance the two and find the perfect sound, which would not be possible without an audio effect track. So it's a very effective technique to sort of add depth or different effects to one sound. Moving on to the drums now, they sound like this. So it's quite basic, there's just a drum loop with some ghost kicks, some hats and shakers. So there's one thing that's interesting in the processing of the drums, and it happens in the main loop here. Without all the effects, it sounds like this. And to me, it wasn't really tight enough. There's too much reverb and delay after the kick in the snare, and it makes the whole thing a bit muddy. And to solve this problem, I used the audio effect gate right here. And basically what this does is that every time the volume goes above a certain threshold, the sample is played back as normal, so there's no change in the volume. But when it gets below this threshold, then the volume is reduced over time. So I set the threshold right under the kick and the snare peak so that they are not affected. And then I put a relatively long release here so that when the input goes under the threshold, the volume gets reduced gradually. So the result sounds like this. You could see the compression happening here, and it's much tighter in my view, and that's what I wanted. Now for the rest of the track, I just added a bass line as a melody here. And for the last drop, I added a pad, and this sound is quite interesting too. It sounds like this. So to create this sound down there, I first used a wavetable synth from Ableton, and itself it sounds like this. I wanted to brighten this sound up, and to do so I used something similar to an audio effect rack, but for instruments. You can see here that I have an instrument rack, and basically both of those chains and whatever instruments are in them are played at the same time when a note is played. So to add a bit more brightness to the sound, I added a white noise layer that has the same decay time as the pad. I also added a really wet reverb after it right here, and some EQ. So the white noise signal sounds like this. And now I'll play the pad by itself, followed by the two together, and I'll turn the noise on and off so you can sort of hear the difference. I thought it sounded more interesting that way and a bit more full, so I kept it. So that's basically all there is to this track called Grey, and now I'll move on to the next. So this is the project file of the track Cyan. I'll also start with the main sample here in blue. The original comes from the track 3000 Miles Ago by Giuliano Perrin, and this track is awesome. There's also a link in the description and you should listen to it. My chop sounds like this. And the initial sample sounds like this. It's quite different, right? I first pitched the sample up 7 semitones, as you can see here, and then I chopped it so that it would swing quite a bit. Swing is achieved by dividing the pulse inequally, and it creates this sort of swing effect with shorter and longer notes at certain points. Now we can hear the difference with or without swing after the other. Now, as for the processing of the sample, I used exactly the same technique as used in Grey. You can see down here that I also have a dry and wet audio effect track. The dry signal only has a tiny bit of compression, and the wet signal has a super strong reverb with lots of compression. Only the dry signal sounds like this. It sounds super dry, which is why the wet channel is really effective here. I also played the same sample an octave lower with the same effects. And one higher with exactly the same processing. And all together the samples sound like this. There's nothing too exciting on the drums this time, except for this beat repeat plugin here, which allowed me to chop up the beat at certain points to create sort of drum breaks. So the drum loop sounds like this. And here's an example of a little drum break made with beat repeat. By the way, if you're using the beat repeat plugin, make sure to turn it on before the actual beat you want it to turn on. So you can see here that I want it to turn on only on the 20th beat, but I turn it on a tiny bit before. Otherwise it won't work, it just won't turn on. But with this beat repeat plugin, you can achieve lots of different results and fun rhythms like those. Now the last element I want to talk about is really small, but I think it plays a major role in the track. I have through and through the track some bells playing, like those. I recorded them with a super long reverb afterwards, and it sounds like this. And I turned this tail of the reverb into a sort of pad that plays through and through the entire track. By itself, it sounds like this. I know it doesn't sound like much, but listen to the difference when it is not played. I'll turn it on and off as the song goes so you can hear the impact it has, and I think it's really, really important to fill up the spectrum, especially in a genre like this. I think it fills up the spectrum really nicely, which is often a challenge for lo-fi hip-hop tracks. Anyway, I think that's it for the walkthrough. Thank you so much to whoever gave me those guidelines. It was really fun to create those tracks. I hope you'll be able to use them in vlogs or in any kind of production that you make. Please send me the link to them, I would be curious to see them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.